everybody. Welcome to our bedroom. It's kind of weird in the coronavirus. Our kids are downstairs doing school. And this is like one of the only rooms with a lock. So this is where we're going to record. But this is Kevin. He's my husband. And I'm going to let you tell him kind of what you do.
So my official title is Licensed Professional Counselor, LPC. But I work with a lot of couples, so I could just as easily be a marriage and family therapist. I work with a lot of people with addictions, so that's one of my specialties as well. But
Yeah.
Variety of fields.
Absolutely. And so on Facebook, we have actually, on Facebook and Instagram both, have been getting a lot of questions about, we're all stuck at home together. And even the healthiest of couples are going to have some conflict, or the healthiest of families. Heaven knows that we've had some conflict already with our kids at home all the time, but especially trying to work while they do school. But we had questions about constructive conflict. Could conflict ever be constructive? If so, how can we have better conflict? And how do we deal with this since we're stuck together for heaven knows how long? So that's what Kevin and I are going to be here talking about, and just kind of going back and forth with his knowledge and just kind of our knowledge from our marriage as well, and the things that we've learned too. So hopefully this is helpful. Anyway, so Kevin, do you feel like conflict can ever be constructive?
Yes, without a doubt. In fact, something that I often tell my clients is that conflict is a healthy sign that two people care about each other. And that often feels very counterintuitive because a lot of us don't like conflict. We shy away from it. We avoid it. We try to bury it. We try to avoid it, whatever. And conflict is simply an opportunity to grow closer to each other. And that's really the purpose of conflict. So if you think about it, if I don't love you, if I don't care about you, the opposite of that is not anger and hatred, it's actually apathy. So if I don't care about you, I become more apathetic towards you. If I care about you, then I'm going to get pissed.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get angry. And sometimes that means we yell, scream, or if we're not the yelling and screaming type, we just get quiet and avoid each other. So
we do the angry huff and puff or hide or whatever. Yeah.
So that's one thing to know about conflict is conflict. If there is conflict, that's kind of the irony in conflict is that it means I care about you. It means I care about us, and therefore that's why I get angry. That's why I get hurt and so forth.
No, that makes sense. Well, and so I've been reading Braving the Wilderness by Brene Brown, and one of the things in there, she said, if we want to get close to each other, we have to expect conflict. Because if there is no conflict, it means we're just hanging out on the surface. We're not getting into what really makes us tick, what really makes us us, what we care about, what we love, what we're passionate about, what we hate, what we dislike, what we despise. That if I'm going to be close to you, then I can expect that we're going to have times of conflict, times where we disagree.
Well, and maybe one thing to clarify is that the purpose of conflict is not to be right. The purpose of conflict is to bring us closer to each other, and that means having a better, deeper understanding of how we both feel about a particular subject and making room for that.
Yeah.
Not judging you for it because you believe or think differently about something, being respectful and understanding, okay, really trying to be empathetic and understanding why something is so important to you, because as human beings, we are purposeful creatures. We don't just wake up one morning and go, I think I'm gonna get pissed tomorrow, around 2:30 in the afternoon, and then schedule that into my calendar. That's not how it works. We get angry and we're hurt and we're triggered by things that are important to us, and so the purpose of conflict is to be able to talk about that, and again make room for the fact that, hey, it's okay that we think and feel differently about this, and I can respect how you feel about this. I don't necessarily have to agree, and it also doesn't mean I have to be wrong or that you have to be wrong. It just means that we feel the validation and understanding from the other person.
Right. So, okay, so let's say somebody comes, they have conflict over. Right now, what I'm hearing on Facebook a lot is both parents are working at home. So you have both spouses working at home. Both of them have important jobs. Both of them are having to do video meetings.
Yep.
And there's a lot of conflict over who's not using headphones and who's being too loud in their video meetings and who's not helping the kids with their homework in between their video meetings and who's not helping with chores. And like there's just a lot of this like division of labor kind of stuff going on, and division, like respecting of space and the importance of jobs. So how would that look if we were going to have a conversation? Like, let's say that's what was going on for us. How would that look? I mean, I already know how it would look for you and I, but how would that look if we were going to sit down and talk about that, with the intent to understand one another and not like, I'm right, see it my way.
Right. Well, the first thing we have to acknowledge, especially in a time like this, is that the old norm that we were used to is gone. It's just say goodbye to it, mourn it, grieve it. It's gone. Okay? The way things used to be, I've heard a lot of people comparing this to 9/11, you know, and if any of you are old enough to remember 9/11 and were alive during that time, you'll remember that life changed forever after that. There were lots of things that just never went back to the old norm. And I think we're seeing a similar effect with this happen across the nation, is that the old norm is gone. Therefore, because of the new circumstances and everybody's adapting to a new norm, of which we don't even really know what that looks like in the end. For now, this is kind of our new norm. And so anytime there's change to what, you know, we're, as human beings, we're creatures of habit, and so therefore we like our routines and our patterns and
our little comfort zones.
Yeah, because that's where we feel comfortable and in control and everything. It's gone. So we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that this is scary, this is uncomfortable, and so if we're going to talk about, you know, adapting to that at home, we have to make room again for the fact that I'm struggling, this is hard, this is uncomfortable, this is scary, I'm anxious, I'm whatever.
Yeah.
So that we can talk about, okay, so now what does that mean now that we're all home under the same roof? How do we adapt to this? Can we take on additional duties? Can you help out here? And then we try to have a conversation about that. But yeah, I mean, it's hard. I mean, one of my clients was just telling me about that, how everybody's under the same roof now, and obviously that's not unique. You know, we're all kind of
there.
Yeah, we're all kind of in that situation. But she was just telling me about how hard that is, and so you know, I guess a couple of reminders. You know, quarantine doesn't necessarily mean you can't go outside. You know, even if that's just, you know, depending on your living circumstances, maybe that means just going into your backyard, or if you're in an apartment or a condo and you don't have a backyard, maybe you have a window you can stick your head out like a dog or something, you know, and just, you know,
get creative,
right? You know, and but sorry, I'm kind of getting off track. So yeah, I mean, I guess back to your point, we have to acknowledge, and I think that's part of why this might be so frustrating and hard for people. Is I've heard a lot of people just say, when are we just going to be past this and just go back to the way things used to be? I think obviously I can't predict the future, but I feel pretty confident in saying that there is not going, the norm we were used to will not be the same norm in the future.
Yeah, so. And I think you're right. Well, and I really think that this can be, I love hearing people say, teach us how to, like, tell us how to deal with conflict better, because that tells me that lots of people are looking forward to a new norm.
Right.
They don't want conflict to be the way it always has been, and this is kind of a forced situation where we have to learn how to deal with one another better.
Right.
And so I guess one of the things that I think has really worked in our marriage, and he's taught me so much, you guys, like he kind of evolved before I did, One of the things, well, it helps you had the
We
schooling
evolved
first.
together,
We evolved together, but one of the things that I feel like has really been helpful is coming at our conversations with the desire to listen and understand. So instead of me coming to him and saying, like, I have a bag of concerns and things that might not be working for me, but I also want to hear what's not working for you or how you perceive it. So let's say I'm hearing a lot of people say, how do we deal with differences of opinion of how to parent the kids or how to school the kids or, excuse me, how to, how do we deal with how much screen time and all those things. And there's often very different ideas of what is okay and what isn't okay. So instead of coming and being like, this is what I have in place and this is what we've always done and, this is what I'm worried about, coming and saying, look, I like talking about our intentions. So what is the intention behind what you want versus what is the intention behind what I want? Because a lot of the time, even though our actions are really, really different, our intentions often line up a lot better than we think they do. We're after the same thing. So, we're trying to get closer, but we're going about it completely different ways. Or we're trying to parent good kids that are responsible and, are their own authority, but we're going about it in a different way. So what do you feel like are the key elements when people are talking about their intentions?
Well, I'd say probably on a very core level, sometimes we don't even know what our own intentions are.
So how do we get to that?
Well, it's, that takes an emotional awareness of, what you're feeling and what you're longing for and wanting from a given situation. So if I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example from our own life and I can't, but I mean, if you, let's say you got on one of our kids' cases about something and then I jump in there and I say, just leave him alone, or it's whatever. And I kind of jump to his defense for one reason or another. It's my duty to better understand myself and understand, whoa, why did I just do that? Mm-hmm. Why did I just jump to my son's defense? Why was that so triggering for me? What was it about what you said or how you said it that triggered something in me, so that I can talk about what those intentions are? What is it that was so bothersome about that, or that triggered me again?
Right.
So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest ones is we need to have that self-awareness of what am I feeling, what's going on for me, and what are my ultimate longings and intentions for our relationship.
Absolutely. And that would also be up to me too to figure out, why did I lose it? Why was I triggered with the kid? Why did I scream and yell? Or come down with the hammer finally. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I found that's been really helpful is curiosity. Mm-hmm. Because when we first got married, I couldn't even tell you what I was feeling, mm-hmm. let alone what my intentions were. Something that was really helpful for me in figuring out my intentions was you just asking me more questions, like explain that, help me understand. That's a phrase that you use a lot that I really appreciate, is when you say, okay, help me understand what's going on for you. And you let me talk, and then as you're actively listening, not to prove me wrong or to prove me right or to contradict me or to insert your part, you're listening to hear what's going on. And when something doesn't make sense, you'll say, well, help me understand that part. Like, what do you mean by this? And so we just ask each other questions until we really understand as best we can, what's going on. And I have to tell you, this isn't going to happen overnight.
No, and that's a good point. Sorry, don't touch your eyes. Remember.
I know I've caught myself touching my hair, my face. I coughed a minute ago.
So no, and yes, I mean, you're gonna. I've already seen a couple of articles online, talking about dealing with relationships and conflicts and stuff, and those are good tips and advice. Yes, these aren't this. No matter how hard you work to make these changes, it's not going to happen overnight, because these things are ingrained in our behavioral patterns, and they have been probably from a very, very young age. And so, yeah, I mean, but you got to start somewhere, right? You know, it's I mean, just even like me touching my eyes, right? It's like I've just in the past couple of weeks, my awareness of how often, like, we were watching a movie, Contagion, if you're interested in it, about, you know, a contagious disease that starts killing the world, you know, but that might be too soon for some people, but in the article or in the movie, they actually mentioned that we as human beings, we have a tendency to touch our face 2,000 to 3,000 times a day. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's the point is we that's why we're always being reminded to wash our hands and don't touch your face, because we do it so often, you know, and we often do it without thinking. We scratch our nose, we rub our eye, we, you know, have an itch in our ear, we, you know, and
we rub our hair.
It's just happening all the time. So my awareness of that has grown tremendously. I still touch my face, right, and to a certain extent we can't totally avoid that, because we have itches and things that need to be scratched, but having that awareness is one of the first steps.
Yeah.
Right. Having
Absolutely.
that awareness, we have to have that awareness that this is what I'm feeling, or this is what's going on, and then that at least allows us to start moving in that direction of making that change. 'Cause,
Absolutely.
yes, it doesn't happen overnight.
No. So, yeah, so we've talked about conflict, like coming at it from curiosity, just trying to understand each other better. We've talked about that just honestly understanding each other, feeling heard goes so far in helping you feel closer to one another. When you know that somebody's there not to prove you wrong or put you on trial, but just to understand where you're coming from, even at the end, if you don't still agree, you feel heard and understood, and you feel closer to the person because you feel like you were heard. And then also understanding that it's going to take a while. These are new habits to form. And like he said, we've come with kind of our relationship dance. From childhood, we learn from our parents, who learn from their parents, who learn from their parents, what marriage looks like, what relationships look like. And you have your own dance with your spouse. So you have your own history of, he always says this and it triggers me, and this is what that thing means because of, you know, years of experience. It's going to take a long time to sort of unravel that, but just the act of coming at it from curiosity is going to help you start to feel closer and safer, so that you can start to share what you're really thinking, really feeling, because you're not feeling judged, or like you're being put on trial, or like you're trying to be proven wrong.
Right.
So I think that's one of the biggest things that happened for you and I, was the more we showed that we were honestly curious and wanted to understand, the safer we both felt. And the safer we felt, the more we were willing to share and get curious with ourselves and really get to the root of the problem. Do we still have conflict? Yes. Yes, we do.
Everybody does.
Everybody has conflict.
Unless you don't care about each other.
Unless you don't care about each other, in which case you become apathetic and then there's no more conflict.
Well, and maybe one clarification. Sometimes people define conflict as yelling and screaming and breaking things. Conflict can happen, I call it a silent conflict, where they're the couples who never argue, but if there is a conflict or tension between them, it just goes kind of radio silent.
Yeah.
You know, and so those are the people who think they never argue, or they saw their parents never argue, and the reality is they just never resolved anything.
Yeah.
You know, and so that's still conflict. It's just happening on a quieter level. So.
Well, and it's still incredibly destructive and
Right.
toxic when you're not talking about things in all these piles of
Right.
unresolved conflict. In some ways, haven't they shown that, like, talking about it, even if it's really emotional, can sometimes be better than not talking about it at all?
And it depends who the person is.
That's true.
If it's the person who needs to talk and work things out, then yeah, they feel better. But the person who's avoiding and shutting down and doesn't want to argue, then they often feel worse.
Yeah.
So it just depends. There's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah.
I guess at the end of the day, Don't be afraid to seek professional help. A lot of therapists, myself included, are doing a lot of teletherapy these days, a lot of video and stuff because of the coronavirus. But these things take time. I get a lot of people who come to me, DEFCON 1, they're ready to throw in the towel, and I'm not going to say it's that there's no hope at that point, but it's like going to the doctor with stage 4 cancer and just saying, hey, I need help now. I've tried to ignore this for, X number of years, and it's kind of like, well, we really needed to address this at an earlier point in time. So, yeah.
So yeah, I agree. So if you find that it's getting to a point where it's really dicey, well, even before it's getting really dicey, if you're just like we don't know how to handle the conflict, now's a great time. I mean, we're at home. You can teleconference into a therapist, and it's a great time to start working on those issues, because we are all together, come out of this with stronger marriages and stronger families, and better able to understand one another and ourselves. So anyway, thank you for joining us in the bedroom. Did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that people often like lists of things to do and to watch out for. That's not going to fix everything. Just be aware. But having said that, there are things we should look out for. And I was just thinking maybe we should do like a rapid fire things that are helpful. So, for example, you used an example where you're saying he always blank, blank, blank. Number one, avoid superlatives, okay? Try to avoid saying always, never, things of that sort, because those are almost always going to be almost always going to be a trigger for the other person. So if I say you always say that, or you never let me, or whatever, what that does on a deep, on the lizard brain, it triggers our defenses, and so if you or your partner are in the habit of saying always and never, try to get out of the habit of doing that, because that's not helpful. I wanted to piggyback off of what you said. Listen to understand. Most of us, when we're in the midst of conflict, we're not listening to the other person. We are very quick to we're formulating a reply.
Yep.
To what the other person is saying. We're formulating a rebuttal. Because what they're saying isn't true, or they're that's just not true. That's not what happened. That's not how I remember it. And so we want to defend. We want to clarify. We need to slow that down. And so, really, and in order to listen, to really understand, that means curiosity. That means we have to be curious. And that means I really want to understand why this is important to you, why you're hurt. And that's hard to do.
It's really hard to do. I would say don't put the other person on trial.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we try to cross-examine each other and like catch people in their words to prove that they're lying or they're wrong or they're whatever. Don't try to cross-examine.
And again, a lot of that comes from a place of being right and wrong. And so you really need to be honest with yourself. Is this about wanting to be right or wrong? Does there have to be a winner here?
Yeah.
And if that's our objective, then we're completely way off track.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, is conflict is not about a winner and a loser. You're actually looking for a win-win is what you're looking for. We're not looking for who's right and who's wrong. We're looking to understand so that we can come up with a resolution that's good for both of us. We're not trying to argue our way versus their way. We're just trying to understand where they're coming from and what they need and want and hope for in the situation, what they're afraid of, what's triggering, and then have them do the same for us so that we both understand each other, and from that place we come up with a solution that's a win-win for us, so that there is no winner and there is no loser. And
I would say one of the big roadblocks that keeps us from doing that is respecting and honoring someone's own, I guess, authority, or just perception or feelings on things, right? You often hear perception is reality, and we have to respect the fact that you may remember something differently than me, and that's okay, right? It doesn't mean you're wrong or that I'm wrong. This is how you perceive it, and therefore this is where you're at, and we need to respect that. We need to honor that, because if it gets into an argument of who's right and who's wrong, again, we're way off.
Yeah.
we're not going to accomplish anything doing that.
So what do you say to people who fall back into their old habits? So as a closing, people who are trying this at home and find themselves like getting on each other's cases
well,
over who's right and who's wrong.
if it starts to become escalated, take a break, right? Cool down. You'll hear some studies say it takes 20 to 30 minutes on average to really cool down for your heart rate and your blood pressure and everything to drop. Because once you're in that heated, escalated moment, you're in a fight or flight state of mind and you're not thinking logically.
Yeah.
So take a break, go for a walk, go do something to disconnect. But then we have to come back again. And that's the part most people don't do, or they're uncomfortable doing, because they don't want to argue again.
They don't want to have conflict.
They don't want to have conflict. So come back together, try to readdress the problem, try to do it calmly, respectfully, and lovingly towards one another. If it starts to build up again, take another break, right? It's all about slowing that train down, because once that train gets going, and things start to escalate out of control, it can get really ugly. And that's when we start really saying and doing hurtful things. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And from a coaching standpoint, if you really honestly don't know what you're feeling or what your intentions are, and trying to talk to the other person to figure it out is triggering you, and you find that you're getting into this, like he said, she said, right, wrong thing, sit down with paper and journal. Just let anything that's coming to mind come out on paper. It's going to give you clarity to figure out what's going on for you, so that you can better communicate that when the time comes to your spouse or to your child or to your mother or whoever it is that you're living with, that you're having conflict with. And yeah, I think that's a really good place to start. Those are some good basics. There's so much to this, you guys. Like, we've worked on this for almost 20 years now.
Yeah. I mean, and I could talk for hours, but it's going to be information overload, and
you have clients that you have to see, and
Right.
so do I. So thanks for joining us, guys. We're going to be doing several of these kinds of videos just to help you make your relationships better during the quarantine and after. So, because we're going to be working on this for years to come, and we want your marriage and your family to be strong and healthy and happy, and what you envisioned when you said your vows in the first place. So, thanks, babe.
good luck.
All right.